It's the video you've all been waiting for, or at least a portion of you who made comments on the last errata-based video, the Player's Handbook Errata. Several erratas have come out for various books in 5th edition. The Player's Handbook is probably the most substantial, so I'm going to go over that, talk about what changes have happened from that to where we are today, or at least explain what errata is if you've heard me say it probably 10 times already in this video and you don't know. So if you're curious about that, stay tuned. What's going on, folks? Sid from Nerd Immersion here, and that was one take, so I'm pretty pumped about that. And I have a starburst in my mouth, which is very unprofessional. So let's jump over to the Wizards of the Coast website here. I went to the Sage Advice Compendium, which was the most recent update. We clicked on that. Right in the beginning, it has a list of all the errata. So you can see this here, Player's Handbook and so on. We're going to talk about the Player's Handbook. Click that. It'll open this document here. So let's talk about errata, first of all. So how can I explain this? First of all, I think errata translates from Latin to like error in the printed word or error or something like that. It's essentially a patch, right? Was this a video game and you found out that something was broken, the company would release a patch, you would download that patch, update your game, and the issue would be fixed. Errata is a similar concept, but for books. I don't know if it exists outside of books, and I really only know of it from RPG books, because they're the ones that seem to get that the most. So you release a book like the Player's Handbook in 2014. As time goes on, you either find errors in the book that are substantial enough that you think you need to release a document stating how to fix them, or enough consistent questions have come in that you decide, hey, we need to tweak, change, update this because we need to fix it. So there's a couple of things to consider there. In the past, I know from like 3rd edition, if you look at the errata version of like the Player's Handbook from 3.5, it was massive. Like the changes were drastic. The big one I can think of, if anybody wants to go look it up, is that the way Wild Shape works for a druid. It was completely reworked. So again, that's what this is. Think of it as sort of a patch to the book. If Wizards of the Coast released their books in true PDF form, then you would just be downloading a new PDF. They don't do that, though, so the only way to stay up to date on current errata for things is to basically purchase it on D&D Beyond and then wait for D&D Beyond to apply those updates. I will also tell you there aren't too many game-breaking changes in this. There are some, and I say the biggest ones probably apply to the Ranger, which is good because the Ranger needs all the help it can get. But that'll lead to a concept that I'll cover in a future video that I have that I really think I want to discuss because I can see some issues being brought up from it. So what I'm going to do is took a long time trying to track down a 2014 version of the Player's Handbook that I could show you. My original 2014 Player's Handbook, the binding fell apart, and it exists somewhere. I don't actually know where it is. I got it spiral bound with dividers in it to make it easier, but I can't seem to find it. I have like 4 other Player's Handbooks in my D&D room next door, and all of them are new versions. So what I can show you here is if I go to this Player's Handbook that I have here, this digital version of it, and we scroll to the second page, what you want to look for to find the original is right here. It says first printing August 2014 and nothing else. It's got this CE next to it. Newer versions will say this contains updates, this contains fixes since the first printing, whatever. Unfortunately, it doesn't tell you what printing, as far as I can tell, what printing the book you have is. It just tells you that it contains updates. So I will read through these and do my best to try to... This is a 3-page document with a lot of minutia text. I'm going to do my best to kind of go high level and really touch on the key points. Things you will see are updates to wording and a lot of removal of erroneous stuff. The only other problem that I can tell you is if a previous errata, let's say from November of 2018, changed a feature, and then they since errata that change by, like, let's say they said, okay, this thing is a bonus action, and then they decided that in this new 2021 that is an action, I don't know if it's captured anywhere, like the genesis of the erratas to date, other than things are listed as new when they're from the current version, but you can't download old versions. If you try to go to the Dive Through the Wizards of the Coast website and like click on the November 2018 errata, it takes you to this version of the document. Okay. So up front, we see dwarves. It replaces throwing hammer with light hammer. Light hammer is not a type, or sorry, throwing hammer is not a type of item in the book. Some left holdover from old editions. Some of these magical abilities here are listed as they're once per day, not once per long rest. Bard's Magical Secrets, they made an update that says at the end of a short rest, you gain additional, when you spend one or more hit dice to regain hit points, then you get the Song of Rest extra healing. Previously, it didn't state that, so essentially, if you ended a short rest and you were healed in some way, you could gain extra hit points as it was written. It didn't say specifics that had to be tied to hit dice. The fighter's fainting attack, it used to say you have advantage on your attack roll, your next attack roll against that creature, which was good because it meant any time that you would go to attack that creature after you used your fainting attack ability, you would have advantage. Now it states your next attack roll against that creature this turn. So that means you either need to use your bonus action for fainting attack and then attack them, or split it up with action surge or something like that. Monk's deflect missiles now clarifies that the thrown back weapon is considered a monk weapon, so all of your monk abilities apply there. Elemental Attunement used to say you can control the elements nearby. Nearby is subjective, that means nothing. They quantified it as 30 feet of you rather than just nearby. And again, all of the changes to the monk are unfortunately seemingly making the 4 elements monk even worse. Elemental Attunement clarifying the nearby makes sense. Eternal Mountain Defense, which gave you access to Stone Skin, used to be at 11th level. It is now 17th level. And Water Whip, one of the most useful monk abilities for 4 elements monk, used to be a bonus action, and they made it an action now, which makes it almost unusable. I mean, it's usable, but almost unusable in comparison. So if we go and take a look at that right here in the original version, it was 2 key points. As a bonus action, you make a Water Whip. Creature within 30 feet makes a dex save. On a fail, they take 3d10 bludgeoning damage plus an extra d10 for each additional key point, and you can either knock them prone or pull them 25 feet toward you. So in theory, as it was written before, you could do that as a bonus action, knock them prone, close the distance, and then use your action to make 2 attacks to hit them with advantage. Now you have to choose to not use your bonus action to do this, but rather use your action to do so. And if you do that, then it doesn't count as for Flurry of Blows or anything, because this doesn't consider itself an attack. Paladin, they clarified that you can use any spell slot that you have for Divine Smite, not just Paladin spell slots. So, for example, if you multi-class with a Warlock, you can use a Warlock spell slot for smiting. I'm not even going to say it's clarifying. It says to a maximum of 68 on the Divine Smite. The way I read it is, I'll go to it because it bothers me to this day that I think it makes no sense. So it says the extra damage is 2d8 for a first level slot, plus 1d8 for each spell slot higher than first to a maximum of 5d8, which in my mind never made sense because you can get 5th level slots as a Paladin and smite out of a 5th level slot, but it only does the same amount of damage as if you smited out of a 5th level as you did out of a 4th. Then it goes on to state the damage increases by 1d8 if the target is an undead or fiend. In my mind, that means the maximum I could do is 5d8, and then if I smite against a fiend or an undead, I do an extra d8, i.e. 6d8. That's how that reads to me. I think that makes perfect sense. So they changed in the errata to a maximum of 6d8. So in my mind, I say, okay, well now if I smite an undead or a fiend, that makes that I do 7d8. But when I made a video on that errata, whenever that errata came out, a bunch of people, and I think it was even clarified by a question I asked Jeremy Crawford on Twitter, that maximum 6d8 includes the d8 from the undead or fiend, why wouldn't you put that before the maximum rather than appending the extra d8 comes after? So I don't know. I'll leave that up to you guys for your opinion. Let me know in the comments. All right. Big changes come to Ranger, specifically the Beastmaster Ranger, because previously, as it was written in the 2014 Player's Handbook, it was even more unplayable than it is currently. So, first of all, it never was stated that your animal companion could regain hit points on a short rest. They stated here, like any creature, it can spend hit dice during a short rest. Okay, that's important. They added an entire new paragraph to that section that says, if you are incapacitated or absent, the beast acts on its own, focusing on protecting you and itself. The beast never requires your command to use its reaction, such as when making an opportunity attack. As it was written before, you needed to command the beast companion, or it literally did nothing. The beast obeys your commands as best it can. It takes its turn on your initiative. On your turn, you verbally command the beast where to move. Let's see. Where is it? Here it is. I missed it in the beginning. The beast obeys your command as best it can. It takes its turn on your initiative, though it doesn't take an action unless you command it to. So as it was written, if you didn't use your action to tell your animal companion to do anything, it just sat there and did nothing, as it was written in 2014. So they said if you're incapacitated, it acts on its own, focusing on protecting you and itself, which is good. It still kind of reads better that, like, if you're unconscious, it is almost better because it has the freedom to do whatever it wants when you're not conscious. And it can use its reaction for opportunity attacks without you commanding it to do so. In the second sentence of the second paragraph, the phrase that begins, though it doesn't take, has been deleted. That was the, though it doesn't take the action unless you command it to. They removed that. In the third sentence, they removed dodge as what you can choose your action to do so, and then changed that to say, if you don't issue a command, it takes the dodge action. So it does have something it can do even if you don't take an action to command it. Big change at level 7. Previously, it just read, on any of your turns where it doesn't attack, you can use your bonus action to command it to take the dash, disengage, dodge, or help action. They removed dodge because it can do dodge automatically if you don't command it. But in addition, the beast's attacks now count as magical for the purposes of overcoming resistance and immunity to non-magical attacks and damage. Because prior to that, the only way it would work is if you got maybe one, you either have a homebrew item or the whatever it is of claws, Amulet of Claws from Horde of the Dragon Queen, the only item that exists in all of 5th edition canon that adds a +1 bonus to natural attacks and makes them magic. Otherwise, you have to homebrew a magic item. There's nothing else that exists. This is finally a way for a Beast Master's Companion to deal damage to creatures with resistance. And then, starting at 11th level, when you command your Beast action to take the attack action, it can take 2 attacks, or it can take the multi-attack action if it has that action. That I don't think applies to too many creatures as it stands, but if you did do that, and let's say it had multiple attacks, or for somehow you lucked out and had a companion that had 3 attacks, it would work like that. Let's see. Clarified that changing sorcerer spell slots, they disappear at the end of a long rest, any spell slots you gain. Clarifying, once again, twin spell, and that it can't focus on things that target multiple creatures. Elemental affinity for the dragon sorcerer got downplayed because now you only add your charisma modifier to 1 damage roll of the spell, whereas before you added it to any time you roll damage. For example, a scorching ray would add your charisma modifier to each ray. Now it would add it to 1 ray. Classification on the warlock: when you choose Pact of the Tome, the spells don't have to be from the same list. Invocations have to be, they're based on the warlock level, not your class level. That was a question that came up a lot in the beginning of 5th edition. If I'm a 7th level character, can I gain access to an Eldritch invocation that requires me to be 7th level? Wizard, not too much. Empowered evocation, the same kind of thing with the dragon sorcerer. It applies to 1 damage roll, not all damage rolls. Let's see. So feats, there were a lot of changes to feats. They clarified alert to make it. The clarification seems almost unnecessary. It's like from when someone is hidden from you to someone being unseen by you. Previously, athletes stated that climbing halves your movement speed. Here it says climbing doesn't cost you extra movement speed. Crossbow expert was like when you take the attack action, you can make a bonus action with a crossbow in your offhand or something like that. Crossbow expert stated that originally it needed to be a loaded hand crossbow. Now it does not. Let me see. Some of these other ones are a little bit tricky here. Keep going. Get to feats. Okay. So Dungeon Delver states originally you can search for traps while traveling at a normal pace instead of a slow pace. And it now reads, traveling at a fast pace doesn't impose a -5 penalty. Let's see. More importantly, probably one of the big ones is Polearm Master, originally only applied to glaives, halberds, and quarterstaffs. Right? Glaive, halberd, or quarterstaff. It now reads glaive, halberd, quarterstaff, or spear. Sentinel is updated so that if you can do Sentinel out with ranged weapons. Tavern Brawler, remove the fact that unarmed strikes because everybody's proficient. I'm trying to think, was there anything major here? The high jump, they state that you can jump a minimum of 0 feet. They clarify that dark vision isn't an end-all fix for seeing in the dark, that it just makes you be, you're not heavily obscured in darkness, you're only lightly obscured, so you still have disadvantage on perception checks in the dark. Let's see. Ready to do so, you take the ready action on your turn, which lets you act using your reaction. Let's see. Spells. There's a lot of spell clarifications too. So, Destructive Smite was on the Paladin spell list. That's not actually a spell. Destructive Wave is, though, so in theory you now have access to that spell. Wizard spell list lists Trap the Soul as a spell option, which doesn't exist, so they removed that. Acid Splash was changed to creatures you can see. Color Spray had a big change in that it did read until the spell ends, which was creatures are blinded until the spell ends, which lasted for 1 round. So in theory, you cast the spell and then they're no longer blinded at the end of the round you cast it. Now it's at the end of your next turn, so potentially could get an entire turn of people, having access to them being blind. Contagion got a big change as one of the most confusing and poorly worded spells. A lot of people had issues because you use a melee attack to hit the creature, and then if you do so, then they need to make Constitution saves, and then if they fail all 3 Constitution saves, then they are affected by the disease from Contagion. Well, what it reads now, which is a big fix, is if you hit them with a melee spell attack, they are poisoned. Immediately poisoned as per the condition, okay? Then they remain poisoned the entire time. If they fail 3 saving throws, the poison condition ends and they're then afflicted by whatever the disease is that you choose. If they succeed 3 saving throws, the spell ends and they're no longer poisoned as well. But it gives you a benefit right out the gate. Find Steed allows you to communicate with each other. It's not just you communicating with your steed. Hero's Feast doesn't do you plus 12 other creatures. It does 12 creatures including you. Couple of clarifications on spell schools. Moonbeam originally read you can move the beam 60 feet in any direction, meaning you had to move it 60 feet. It's now up to 60 feet. A lot of abilities that had people take saving throws at the start of their turn, potentially meaning I cast a spell on you, you fail your saving throw immediately, and then at the start of your turn you get to make another saving throw so you're not even affected by the spell at all. Now the ones that improperly had make the saving throw at the start of your turn are now the end of your turn. This is a funny one. Prismatic Wall references a Rod of Cancellation. Let me see if I can find it here. It references how a Rod of Cancellation destroys a prismatic wall. Rod of Cancellation doesn't exist in 5th edition. Here it is. A Rod of Cancellation destroys a prismatic wall, but an anti-magic field has no effect on it. Rod of Cancellation doesn't exist. It's not a magic item that exists in 5th edition. So the player's handbook referenced, I mean, it probably sounds like a pretty cool magic item that we never got to see, but that doesn't count for anything. Sanctuary got a little bit of a nerf in my mind, because Sanctuary originally read, you ward a creature, someone to attack them needs to make a wisdom saving throw. If the warded creature makes an attack roll or casts a spell that affects the creature, it ends. It now reads, if it, where is it? If the warded creature makes an attack, casts a spell that affects an enemy, or deals damage to another creature, the spell ends. Because if you're clever, as it was written, there are a lot of ways that you can deal damage to another creature, whether that be breaking alchemist fire, lighting oil that's on their body, that kind of thing, that doesn't classify as casting a spell or as making an attack. So that kind of is a slight nerf. Not a huge deal, though. Slow, as it was written, it states now at the end of each of its turn. The way slow was written before, you could argue that if you failed your original save and failed the secondary save, you were automatically affected by slow for the length of the duration. It's clarified now that you make the save at the end of each of your turns, giving you more opportunities to break out of slow. Also, all the polymorph spells properly state that you cannot affect a creature at 0 hit points, meaning you couldn't kill somebody, then polymorph them into like a mouse and then bury the mouse. Polymorph does not work on creatures with 0 hit points. True Resurrection now states that if a creature was undead, it brings them back in their non-undead form. Exhaustion now states if you're raised from the dead, it reduces your exhaustion level by 1. And then a lot of the animals have adjustments. So black bear's bite and claw attack at a +3 to hit, it's now +4. Brown bear was +5, it's now +6 correctly. The imp clarifies that it's non-magical attacks not made with silver weapons. And the Quasit says non-magical weapons is now non-magical attacks. A little clarification there. Riding horse probably got the biggest buff in that it's to hit was a +2, and now it's a +5. And a warhorse, I think, was a +4, and now it's a +6. So that is as best a quick rundown as I could do going through the errata. I guess more importantly, I'm bringing it to your attention that this document does exist. There'll be a link in the description to this specific errata, but also to the Sage Advice Compendium, where if you click on it, you can gain access to all of the other erratas if you want to look through. There's not too much stuff in there. I think there was some changes to spells to make, like in the Elemental Evil Player's Companion, there were changes to spells to make them mimic when they were reprinted in Xanathar's. For example, I think Abdelzim's Horrid Wilting did like 2 or 3, whatever the damage dice is, less than the reprinted version in Xanathar, so they updated the free thing to give you the current information. So I'm curious, what are your thoughts on errata? I feel like the reason 3.5 exists was there seemingly, probably, I assume, was a lot of errata and a lot of issues that Wizards of the Coast didn't like with 3rd edition, so they decided rather than trying to release PDF errata documents on the internet to update things to where they wanted it to be, they just released a new edition entirely in 3.5. I don't think we're at that point here in 5th edition. Obviously, I've been doing a whole series about stuff that I would fix in 5th edition, so I do think there are some things that are broken, and some of them potentially could be adjustments in errata, but I feel like the topic of what errata means and whether it's good or bad is a future video. But what do you think about the errata I just covered? And give me your thoughts on errata in general. I'll take that information into consideration for when I publish the next video. So, thank you all so much for watching. And once again, a shout out to all of my patrons on Patreon. I appreciate all of the support that you give me. And again, there is still 1 day left to enter my Explorer's Guide to Wildmount giveaway. There's a link in the description for that as well. I hope you all enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time.